everybody. Welcome to Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations with, as always, I'm your host, Gene, the Enjoyment Coach, and this is episode 64. Our guests today are Candace and Mike Chisholm. Candace is the CEO and co-founder of He Changed It, a mobile application for men's mental health and wellness. With over 25 years in the complementary healthcare field, Candace has spent close to 3 decades balancing body, mind, and spirit for her clients, many of them being men. Mike is Candace's husband and the host of the heCast podcast, the official podcast of He Changed It. He is a delightful 45-year-old that collects many things and obsessed with David Letterman. Recently, they authored a book called She Changed It, One Ordeal, Two Perspectives, which launched yesterday. A book about enduring trials and the lessons and blessings that ensue when sought. The book has a literal twist in that one half is Mike's POV from the male perspective, and then flipped over, there's Candace's female take. She Changed Me will be released. Well, it was released yesterday on November 9th, with partial proceeds going to childhood cancer research. Mike and Candace, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, oh my gosh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a real kick to be here, Gene. We're so excited to do this with you.
Well, I'm very excited to have you both here today. So it's been a long time in the making, and obviously we've been just waiting for this book to launch. I didn't realize that was what this was all about. So how about we take a moment just to brag about hitting so many milestones yesterday with this book launch.
Yeah, that was like crazy surreal. You have these hopes of, when you're writing this. We have a writing coach. Her name is Diana Ryers, and she edited the book, and she was like, okay, so these are sort of the steps that you take, and so you can get picked up by distributorships and all of that, and so you kind of have it in your head, like, okay, if we work really hard and we gather our troops, this is something we could do. But when it happens, the moment I had a girlfriend that sat me down and almost had to like kind of slap me silly a minute, because I was like, okay, no, wait. She's like, girl, you are like number 29 of all books on Amazon. Like, dude, take a minute. So yeah, it was super surreal, and still sort of riding that high from it, which I'm totally leveraging today.
Well, number 29 of all the books sold on Amazon yesterday, like that is a victory lap that definitely needs to be felt, right? Like I could only imagine the imposter syndromes and everything else were coming up, and then it's staring you in the face. This is no longer a feeling. These are just facts. Those are things that you guys crushed.
Yeah, it's funny that imposter syndrome thing. It rears its head in all sorts of different places. It's almost like I talked to somebody at one point. They talked about I don't know if they were a life coach. I forget who it was. I've read a lot of stuff over the years, but this stuck with me. And it talks about your saboteur, and you have this little voice, and that's that imposter syndrome thing, right? Yeah. And says you can't do it, and then you vanquish it. Maybe you hit a certain goal, you get to a certain place, and suddenly that you vanquish that saboteur. But the saboteur is intelligent, and the saboteur will find other ways later on in the next phases. So it's like, yeah, like writing the book. Like, who are you to write this book? Well, our story was powerful enough that it was worth writing, and that destroyed that saboteur. Then it was like, oh, you're not talented. And so, we got help, got a professional editor, and along the way, every single time that saboteur, that little voice, that imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, showed up, we were able to vanquish it. And yesterday, what a crazy experience that was. Like seeing our name on the bestseller list. And again, that's surreal to say that, seeing our name on the bestseller list. But the thing I loved was there were categories. Amazon is phenomenal in how granular they get with their categories of books. And so we were number one in, like, I forget how many categories, multiple, like 6, 7, 10 categories, something like that. But the categories themselves, like personal development and health or self-help, and I'm seeing The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, which is one of my favorite personal development books. The Power of Now, or David Goggins' book. And seeing our book, Mel Robbins, seeing our book right beside that, it's like, okay, we're going to screen capture this.
many screenshots.
Yeah, and it does our name deserve to be there? I mean, we put in the work. It's out there. People are buying it, and we think that people will resonate with the story because of the male, female, husband, wife perspective of it. It's a pretty unique book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And and that saboteur showing up, be like, I've started to reform my relationship with the saboteur as like the indicator of like, I'm at my edge, I'm about to do something worthy.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you think you can do this? Fuck yeah, I can. Let's go do this.
Love
You
it.
guys did it. And
Yeah, we did it.
like,
It's done.
Hold my beer.
We're
Yeah.
authors.
be like, watch this.
Yeah. I mean, we were having a hard time even considering ourselves authors. Like, we got a proof of the book a week or two ago, the final approval book kind of a thing. And it's like, holy shit, we're authors. And just being able to say that, and now being able to say, on a certain level, we're best-selling authors. And hopefully that takes us to that next chapter of what this looks like and on adventures of all sorts of different types. And at the end of the day, hopefully it ultimately helps He Changed It. The company Candy's building and also raises a lot of money for childhood cancer research. Like, I mean, the wins out of this, if this thing goes the way it could go, the wins are just going to make the world a much, much better place. So we're excited about that too.
Yeah.
And just like getting to this point where you've experienced these wins is like we talked about before we went on air. Like, this isn't like the end of a journey. You're just at your next base camp. And now you're like, wow, we climbed that mountain. That means we might be able to climb this next one.
Oh, totally. Like, it's crazy that the leverage, like, I think that for me, like, I'm competitive by nature. So for me to see those numbers, like, I'm like, refresh, and, Mike and I have actually experienced that before. We were in business together and, we were kind of running for a pretty big promotion in business. And I was like, oh, my sweet spot, and that's what that felt like yesterday. It was this adrenaline that came from it. So this morning I'm like, okay, that felt so good. Let's do that again. Like, that's kind of that endorphins that get released into. I hear that's what happens when you work out. Maybe.
I can confirm it is what happens. So you've got the same experience.
So yeah.
But every time you go to pick up the weight, it's like, I don't want to do this, but I know how great it's going to feel afterwards.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Just like writing a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about like how you got started writing a book, and then hopefully we'll talk about the unique flavor of the POV in it.
Sure.
You want me? Okay. All right.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, both of us, Candy and I are both, we're both characters. We both really, really are. We both have gifts of being dynamic and whatnot, but we have a lot of contrast too. Candy, she talks about how competitive she was. Well, during that time at our business, that she's referring to, we got to a new mountaintop and I hated every step of it. I'm not competitive at all. Like, I'm the opposite. I'm like, hey, let's all run together and win together. Peace, love. We can all, like, it's idealized or fantasy almost, but that's me. I'm not that guy. Yeah. And so we're both characters, and people have always said to both of us at different times over the years, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. We've heard that. We're those people that have heard that many, many times. And I think both of us in the back of our mind, it's safe to say, have said, yeah, you know what? I would love to add that to the list of things that I've done in this life.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we necessarily had a story in mind that we would necessarily write. We both wrote for fun and would write things down and memoir things, but that all changed on Christmas Eve of 2019. We're both, believe it or not, Gene, we're grandparents.
Gray hair.
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
I just assumed it was because of Mike. So
Bless.
So we're grandparents. Our granddaughter, her name is Alara, and she is our world. She's absolutely our world. Candy was there when she was delivered. I was there very shortly after. And within like 2 weeks of our granddaughter being born, she would stay at our house one night a week at least, and spend many hours with us on top of that. We have a beautiful relationship with them. Our kids are gracious enough to let us have that unbelievable relationship with her. And when she was 18 months old, Christmas Eve, we found out she had a tumor the size of my fist behind her tailbone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and you talk about holy smokes when we had just spent time planning a trip to Candy and I were going to get away. We're going to go to California and go to Disneyland. I wanted to see the new Star Wars land. I'm a huge nerd. I love Star Wars. And planning our life goals for 2020, and suddenly it's like, no, that's all going out the window. And our kids on Boxing Day, we're going to BC Children's Hospital, or the day after Boxing Day, which is in a foreign city, Vancouver. They had a place to stay at Ronald McDonald House, and we just kind of looked at each other and said, well, we're gonna have their backs. And so we dropped everything. We went down a day early to kind of get a lay of the land for when they flew in, so we knew the route from the airport to BC Children's. And we just said, we're just going to be there. We're going to be their support, and so they can do nothing but just focus on their daughter. She had a surgery on
we thought it was gonna be a week.
Yeah, we thought we
didn't think it's like we kept that feeling of like, oh, it's a cyst, or because they didn't know here in Kelowna General was great. They didn't know, and so they just kept saying, oh, we don't know. So when we went down, I packed, like enough for like 4 or 5 days kind of a thing. So we didn't have a clue really what we were in for.
Yeah. We thought they were going to remove a cyst. They were going to be okay. And we would just go from where we were in Vancouver and fly off to California from there a few days later. Well, then, the surgery was completed on New Year's Eve. And that was the longest day of my life. That was the hardest day of my entire life, was that day. And then a few days later, pathology came back and said, no, this thing's cancerous. You guys are here till minimum April. She's going to go through 4 rounds of chemo. And we looked at each other and we're like, well, we're not going home. We're staying. And so we stayed down in strangers in a strange land while our house back home locally is still running, all the bills, everything that was, that's running normally. We were then set with the task of figuring out how we were going to stay down there and figure out all the logistics in behind the number one objective, which was to support our family and get this girl healthy. Now the good news is there's a happy ending to it. Alara, they have a hard time using the words cancer-free, but she's cancer-free. She's not even considered.
It needs time.
Yeah, it needs time before they can actually they're allowed to say that. But I mean, it's gone. And she's not even considered immune compromised anymore. So the ending of the story is phenomenal, but the story itself brought us to that place. Is a long answer to a short question. Now we had something that we could write about, and we both started writing about it in Vancouver. And when we got back, we realized we had something here.
Yeah. Well, what ended up happening was like Mike and I both, we journal, it's cathartic for us. You'd come home from a day at the hospital and you sort of start journaling. But what really ended up happening was, we shared as a family. So not just us, but, Alara's mom, dad, Nico and Jess, we shared as a family the journey on social media. And it just kind of garnered this like following, where people would be checking out on us all the time. Like we're huge community people. Both Mike and I are born and raised in Kelowna, and Nico's born and raised in Kelowna. Jess knows a ton of people. So like, it was just one of those things where we wanted to share, and social media, you always talk about the ugly side, but the good side is you get to keep in touch. And so that everybody back home just felt like they were part of the journey. And so what ended up happening is we got tons of messages about people saying, we really, you guys are inspiring about how you're going through this. Like, we don't even know how you're doing it. Of course, they're not seeing some of the behind the scenes, which is like me breaking down, Mike breaking down, the kids, we all had our times of like sitting in the corner of a hospital, bawling our face off. But, what we did do was we always said we moved as a unit, through that experience. Like, we had this little wolf pack, and Laura was in the center of it. And we had this like foursome that we just sort of moved as this unit through the hospital, through every stage. And that is, I think, was the key, to be honest. And then like the other outside, like, a lot of, Indigenous teachings and whatnot, they talk about how the family unit and how they just have these rings of family around. The kids are always in the center and they have these rings of family around them. That's how it felt, because we had this community that did the same. And so it morphed into a book for us, because, a lot of people kept saying like, man, it'd be great to know how that happened. And the other thing is when we were in Vancouver, I looked for a book on grandparents, going through cancer. You know, there's
how do you
parents,
support your
there's
kid
kids
who are supporting their kid?
Yeah, and there's not, because there's no resources or anything like that, you know, for it. And so that was another interesting thing for me. So that, you know, future down the road, I'd love to see if we could set something up for that. But yeah, so that was really that's the basis of how this book started, and then it just kept morphing into this dual story.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's like there's multiple times I was getting goosebumps listening to that. Like that idea of that wolf pack that was just keeping in step with everybody. That unit mentality is like we're all there to support, giving it, you know, everybody their chance to be in the corner crying, because, like, let's face it, if you weren't, like, there'd be something wrong. I could only imagine being down there without that support. It would feel like time would be standing still. Like, it'd be so tough to do it on your own.
Yeah.
We saw it so many times, and it was heart-wrenching. Yeah. You'd see like a mama there with her baby and dad's at home with 3 other kids, or, you know, and she was just all by herself. Like there's that building harbors stories like you could just sit there and write all day long.
Absolutely.
And a lot of them are just heart-wrenching. So we never took that for granted. And that was one thing I was really proud of too. Like our whole family didn't take that for granted. We were always like, hey, thanks for being there for me when I went down this path, and thanks for this. So I'm proud of that. It was a good accomplishment, I think, that we got to do. Yeah. Well,
like as you're talking about that, you know, how they have like the emotional support animals that come into the different like old folks home or hospitals, be like, well, there needs to be emotional support grandparents that come in to help prop up these ideas.
And that's the thing. Like, I think that if, you know, again, this is down the road. I mean, you know, me, I'm constantly like, what can I do next? I should probably finish one thing before I do that. That's my ADD. But I would love to see some sort of resource set up where there could be more, because that, like, I'm sure there are every grandparent on this planet, or the majority of them, want to do exactly what we did. We were so lucky to be able to do it. So lucky. We're both entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We can both sort of set up camp from wherever we are to work, and we were able to be part of the process. I don't know how we would have been able to stay home, and I don't know how those grandparents can. I know that necessity dictates it a lot of times. But I think it's a travesty. I think we need to be better at setting up some support, whether it's grandparents, aunties, uncles, whatever, where they can have that community. That is everything to healing. Everything to healing.
Yeah, because not only does then that little girl in that center see a strong, supportive pack, which allows each of them to go through their grief and their sadness and their highs and probably like very scary lows through situations like that. And all she gets to see is the love and the support.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I'm sorry, I'm like totally just taking over. Anyhow, no. All of a sudden. Yeah, but that is really for Alara to see. The fascinating thing about watching a child go through cancer is they don't bring baggage into that situation. So she's not thinking poor me. She never thought poor me, and because she doesn't understand that connection. That wasn't part of the process for her. We have all of our lived experience goes, oh my God, this could be terrible. So we are all experiencing those emotions around her, but she doesn't deserve that energy that we were putting out. So when we were in that space, if we had that energy, and there's a part in the book that is, it's astounding what ended up happening. I went through a very, very crazy experience with that energy. And if it wasn't for the 4 of us being able to take turns, then she would have gotten some of that, I think. And that does inhibit the healing.
Oh, I would. Yeah, 100%. Mike, I noticed there was a smile. There's a state change here. Want to fill in some color to that?
Well, that's on Candy's side of the book. And if Candy talks about the idea that she might have not been at her best, I don't want to necessarily pile on top of that. I'll let her words on her side of the book talk about that. But that's the neat part about the book, about the story, is Candace's perspective versus my perspective, and the different. Even though we're together as a family, we're together as a married couple, but we're also on very individual journeys. You know, Candy and her side of the book, one of the things that she says, and she says it in life, and I referenced it on my side of the book, is sometimes a blessing comes like a kick in the teeth, and if you would have said to me, 3 weeks before this all happened, if you would have said to me, hey, Mike, I've got a contract here. You sign this contract and you will be able to take 5 entire months and spend every single day with Alara. Your stuff will get figured out. Your business stuff will get figured out. Life at home will get figured out. Mortgage payments, all that shit. That'll all get figured out. Don't worry. You can just sign here and you will be able to spend 5 months entirely and see Alara every single day. I would have signed it without even, I would have totally signed it. Well, that's what ended up happening. And like Candy said, to her point, and on my side of the book, there's an entire chapter on this, how present Alara was. And I mean, I'm a big Power Now guy. Being present is a silver bullet. It's a silver bullet for anxiety. It's a silver bullet for the emotional baggage that we carry from the past. If you're present, you can really, really eliminate those things. And that is how she lives. She's got a bag of chemo. And then as soon as that's done, she looks at you and she's like, play? She wants to go to the playroom. She wants to take it while she's like, and we're just, holy smokes, this girl is astounding in how present she is. And I wrote an entire chapter on how I wish that I could be as present as that 18-month-old. So, I mean, she taught us, when the book is called She Changed Me, one ordeal, 2 perspectives. The 2 perspectives talk about, Candace has a side. You read her story. You get to the center of the book where the pictures are. You're done her story. You flip the book. There's my side. You read my story, and it goes into the center of the book where the pictures are. And that's the 2 perspectives. But the title is She Changed Me. And that's one of many of the ways that she changed me, was that example of being present.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
What a powerful lesson. Like, to go back to your, the gift comes from the kick in the teeth. It's like what a gift, right? Like, and what a reflection to be able to be there and supporting each other and being able to absorb that gift versus all the tragedy and the lower energy that was definitely present there.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And now, and it's going to pay off for the rest of our lives, because I've got this bond with this little girl now, with this, so many grandparents wish that they could have the bond that Candy and I have with our granddaughter. Well, it's because we went through some shit when she was young, and we went through it together,
Yeah.
And you've got the recent Halloween pictures to prove it, as your young Padawan.
Mike's dream come
that
true.
Was a dream come true. I've got a very good Luke Skywalker, old man Luke costume, because I'm an old man now. Old man Luke Skywalker costume from The Last Jedi. And I mean, when you look at her, she got this beautiful big brown eyes and she got this long hair, and she loves Star Wars. And so her as Rey and me as we got a rad costume for her as Rey, and I've got a really almost like kind of movie perfect costume of Luke. And so we had a very fun photo shoot there. That was a dream come
those
true.
Photos online. They were great.
Oh.
Like, you guys are grandparent goals.
Yeah, we take our job seriously. We dig it.
Oh, being a grandparent
It's the best thing on the
is
planet.
the greatest thing in the world. It's so great.
I loved being a mom, but being a grandparent's just that next level.
Gene, I that's a really good point, and it's one that I'm gonna now kind of hit record in my own mind, because an insight just hit me. People would ask about the grandparent thing, and I would say to them, hey, listen, it's all of the love with none of the fear. Like you look at new parents, right? And they're afraid of, the soother falls on the ground the first few weeks of it. They're putting it under scalding water to sterilize the thing, and then 6 months later, they're just going, wiping it off on the shoulder. Here you go, put it back, right? But like the fear of the new parent, right? It's astounding. But the love is also astounding. Well, when people ask about the grandparent thing, it's like all the love with none of the fear. And I would say that, and at 18 months, holy shit, did that ever flip? Because the fear suddenly, it showed up. It was almost like the universe saying, hey, well, okay, but there can be moments in life where that fear, it hits you too. And that certainly is worth noting.
Mm.
And I think without going back to that anchor of love, like that fear can be, it can take wild control. And it just sounds like you had this anchor, and it never got, I'm sure it felt like it got out of hand at times, but being able to pull that back down and integrate that back into that love is, I'm just excited to read this story.
Well, I'll tell you, I know that you like talking about hindsight being 2020 and going back and saying what if. I'll tell you that if we would have been able to read this book, like this book is new, it's just on the shelves now. It was just finished in 2021. But if you would have been able to take this book and bring it back to us in early 2020 and we were able to read it, we would have gone through that situation that much better. But success leaves clues. And so, we did successfully get through that situation. Let's take some of those clues. Let's write them down. Let's give them to people who are not just going through that situation, but other really tough situations, because those clues that are in this book are transferable. They can be used in all sorts of different situations where life gets hard. And let's face it, every human experience has moments where life gets really hard.
Yeah.
No, that's you're 100% right. All the lessons you've gone through are transferable to everywhere else. And guess what? I hear people talk about, oh, that's not fair. Be like, life doesn't give a fuck about fair. Life is just life. And sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's really bad. And it's on both those spectrums. Whatever's possible is still possible, right? And it's how you're going to face those things and get through those things.
Yeah, and I think that that was the other thing, like with that twist in the book about so me writing one side and Mike writing the other. And, Mike brings up a really good point. Laura going through cancer was the catalyst, obviously. Mike's side of the book is actually, I always say, read his side first, because it's a very linear side of the story, which is so beautifully written. It's an epic tale of what happened. I have just a little bit more of an existential writing style. I'm sort of all over the place, much like my brain. But what was cool and what we try to say to people is that we experience the same thing, but from completely, even though we're a married couple, we're together all the time, it was completely different. You'll see when you read both sides, you'll be like, there's things where you're like, wow, they thought that happened completely differently. The things that showed up for me, oh my God, he sort of, and I would never say brush past them, but he was just sort of he just took it in stride. Now, I think where the lesson in that is that right now, especially in the world, we have some extremely divisive stuff going on.
Polarized.
Right now?
What? No, I'm just sitting in my basement. I got no idea. Yeah. Yeah. And, and that was the other thing about that we were so yes, it's the he and the she, which, we talk a lot about, especially because of what we're building. But it's also the fact that I could go through it and he could go through it differently, as could the kids. And yet we can all be like, yeah, but the ordeal was still the same. We just processed it differently and respect each other for that. And that's what I think we really tried to encapsulate into the book, is that it's diversified. Not diversified to the extent that some things are, but I can look at Mike and go, yeah, I get that you didn't see it that way. I did, but that's cool. It's still good. We still understand each other. And that is a key component, I think, of why we wanted to write that too. It's just, we came together on the same path.
I think that's
a beautiful gift.
It is just because the one thing that they did in that situation, for us, is they do, and it sounds like it's really cool that it's not, but there's a place in where they say, there's a high percentage, and I don't remember the percentage. It was in the 70s or 80s, of families that don't make it through together because the stress breaks them. And that was a cold, hard slap in the face, right? So, and I think that's because of that. You see things differently. So we got to really put the effort in to come back together at the other end. Sorry.
Oh, no, don't be. There's the drop the mic moment. No pun intended towards you, Mike. But that's definitely a powerful reminder. It's stress and tension is powerful, and if you leave it unmitigated, it will tear everything to shreds.
Yeah. Yep. It's like limestone, I remember my very first counselor. I loved her so much. I've had many since then, but she always said it is like a crack in a limestone, and just enough pressure, and it's, it doesn't take much sometimes when it's there. And that has never left me, that visual. And I think that that's an important thing. Yeah. It doesn't have to be, you can heal it. You can put it back together, but.
So, Mike, we kind of jumped all over where I think you might have had some additions to the perspectives.
It was something you said. Something you said earlier. Oh, you talked about understanding. Yeah, and the idea of understanding, your spouse. You think about that. Like now, it's the other thing about the book is Candy wrote hers. I don't want to say in isolation, but we wrote the book separate from each other. We didn't read what each other was writing. Only our editor did, and our editor was like, "Okay, don't worry. This book is going to work really, really, really well." She just kept reassuring us that it was going to work well. And about 3 weeks ago, for the very first time, Candy and I we had a very unique date night. We had a night where she was on one end of the couch, I was on the other of the couch, and we just read each other's story for the very first time. And you want to talk about understanding, man? You think you understand your spouse, but then you read them pouring their heart out on the printed page for a few hundred pages. You're going to have some light bulb moments as to how your spouse thinks. And so for us, I look at this also as another one of those blessings that just show up that you don't even realize are going to show up. We actually kind of have a bit of a playbook as to how the other one thinks that was written, not affected by the other person in any way. And that was a really cool part of the depth of understanding that Candy and I were able to kind of get about each other through this process too.
That's really cool that you guys did that, being unfiltered and just being the conduits to your stories, and then seeing how they just line up and seeing how those perspectives within each of those moments differed, but yet you still are such a cohesive unit.
Yeah, I had a couple girlfriends go, no, wait, you didn't read it, because we had sent it into our editor, and then we're like, okay, because we didn't want to change anything.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait, no, you didn't read any of it? I'm like, no, man, because I think it would just alter a little bit what would have been the true page. I didn't write for him, and he didn't write for me. We wrote for ourselves.
Powerful. Was that in an initial intentional decision, or was that something that kind of came up through the process?
Yeah, it came up through the process very early, because what we did was our editor said, okay, so here's how we're going to lay this out. You're going to write 8 chapters each. Okay. I want chapter 1 by a certain date. Okay.
Right.
So we sent in our chapters. I kind of jumped on it right away, and Candy worked on hers more throughout the process of that deadline. And so we approached it even completely different. So when I finished mine, I sent it to the editor right away. Candy sent hers a little bit closer. The timeline was a little different. And we had our first Zoom meeting with her, and she said, okay, so have you read each other's? And we said, well, no. And she goes, huh, okay. And she had by that point read and edited both, or been in the process of reading and editing them both. And she's like, huh, okay. And I think the decision was made kind of right then, I think, is when we said, okay, well, maybe we don't read each other's until the end.
Yeah.
And then we write each other's introductions, which is what we ended up doing. We ended up writing each other's. We have testimonies in the book, or forewords on both sides, but the introduction for each one is written by each other moments after we finished reading. Like literally it says the introduction was September 2021.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are so heart-centered. It's crazy.
Well, that just kind of ended up being that way, but it was kind of a happy coincidence that it happened.
Yeah.
That is wow. Just the experience of going through that and then reading that, and how close that probably brought you guys, and how much more exciting all that builds for that anchor, that idea, that base camp of filling more needs is starting to think that there might be a superpower here around finding a spot that doesn't have the resources and diving into it to help support those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. We kind of, we like the challenge, I guess you could say, of helping to kind of bring that stuff out for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it brings your competitive side and Mike's let's all dance together side.
Yeah. We're good.
Really beautiful.
It's a good compliment for sure. I was listening to Simon Sinek on his podcast the other day. And I mean, I love that guy. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. And he was talking about how in a bookstore, there's self-help in almost all bookstores, right? But there's no category for help others. And I love the idea of helping others. Many of the books that have impacted me the most are people who are telling their story in hopes of helping others. And I mean, isn't that how we make the world a better place, is by helping each other? And if we can take, vulnerability is so important. I love that it's in the forefront. I mean, on heCast, you know, and in this course that we've built with Canadian Mental Health Association for Candy's company, for He Changed It. I mean, vulnerability is a silver bullet. It's a thing where vulnerability and gratitude are two silver bullets. If somebody can learn to be more vulnerable and they can learn to be more grateful, their life is going to look very differently in a positive way. And the idea of what Sinek said when he said, you know what, in bookstores there should be a section for help others. That's a section. That's one section other than the superhero section. That's the section I would shop in.
Comics first.
I would shop in the help others section.
Priorities, Candace. Priorities.
Right. 10 years. We're going 10 years. I got it.
I can respect it. I can respect that. Yeah. But, you know, it's interesting you talk about vulnerability and helping others. I just saw a quote today about the real conversations are when we take the armor off. And like that really like resonates with what you're saying too.
Yeah.
I think vulnerability, especially in men, this is our podcast is focused on men's mental wellness and men being able to work on themselves a little bit. You know, a gateway for men, you know, you think about men and how closed off we are and how when we're hurting, we put the armor on, right? And we don't talk about our shit. But when is there a time where men many times can be naturally vulnerable? It's when they're helping another man. If another man's going through something, like they're going through a divorce or something, and maybe there's a man that sees that and went through the divorce 10, 15 years ago, but it's on the other side of it and has healed from it, or at least as good as it's going to be, they'll give unsolicited advice. They'll talk about, hey, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, make sure. But that's being vulnerable. That's them talking about something that's happened. They're just doing it from a position of strength. And so being vulnerable and helping others, I think are things that could be our bridges that are built naturally that we just don't talk about going over them very much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen a lot of that. Well, I know we've talked a lot about the book. Do you want to like jump into a little bit of He Changed It? I'm looking at the clock. We're at almost 38 minutes here. So this conversation is just going by so fast.
Yeah. You know, He Changed It we've been, you know, it's a startup. And so it's startup life, but it's been probably one of the most rewarding things that I think I've ever jumped into. We've been working on it for 2.5, almost 3 years. You know, the first 1.5 years, almost 2 years was a lot of research. We did a lot of research and development as to, is this something that's needed? Now, men are super under-resourced in the marketplace. You know, I don't have to tell both of you that, but, you know, most of the help for guys has always been centered around addiction, and then mental illness. And, you know, it's always been on that side of things where it's like, okay, we're in trouble. How do we get this guy out of trouble? And, you know, I've always, you know, I call myself an agent of change. And I always say, like, I want, I'd like to see things get down to this cellular level, because I know for me, I had to do that in my life a couple of times. I did it in my practice. You know, I've worked in the complementary therapies for over 25 years. You know, with nutrition and health and biofeedback with kinesiology. And I've seen the change when you take a proactive approach. And, you know, we even in terms of our physical health with COVID, we saw, hey, like on the flip side of things, if you take it head on with your immune system and keep your stress low and all of that stuff, then you've got a fighting chance to make sure that if you do get COVID, that you can fight it. You know, I mean, there's controversy around that. I get that. But that's really the premise of what He Changed It is. It's that prevention. So it's that proactive approach to complete performance for men. So it's, you know, a lot of guys have in their life, you know, sort of focused on the physical fitness. Just that's a genetic DNA thing. But we bring in mental, emotional, soul, and social fitness and ways to help to work around that on the prevention side. And so we're really excited. We've got some huge plans, coming with incentivization when it comes to balancing your health. And we're so excited for what's to come. And Mike mentioned the Canadian Mental Health Association. We've got the release of the first ever click-through course for them that'll be available only on free. It'll always be free. This one's on communication. So released this month. So I'm really, really excited. Everything can be found at He Changed It. They can download the app from there. They can listen to the podcast from there. Like, they can find all the access. So yeah, we're stoked. stoked for it.
Oh, that sounds like an exciting time. And you just launched a new rebranding or evolution of the brand too, right?
We did, yeah. We wanted to kind of open up the branding a little bit because we will be bringing in a women's app as well, and so we wanted some congruency between the branding. When we started, everything's pretty new, and you're just sort of going through the paces.
Yeah.
What we love the new branding because it's really about growth. When you look at the new logo, it's got a variegated green. It's like a shield. And you just see these guys that are in the app. Now, I'm not in the app. I'm not in the community at all. So, but my team, and Mike tells me, and then my team is majority men. And the guys in there are sort of this shield, it's like these joining forces to help whoever's in there get through what they need to be. And everybody sort of takes turns in doing that, is what they tell me. So I love that new branding for that reason, because I think it's really powerful to show that you're not alone. I know we're at time, but super, super quick stat, it was interesting because in 2019, in Canada, we had 5,800 deaths by suicide and 4,011 of them were men. But in 2020, the suicide rate actually went down. And everybody's like, well, why is that possible? Because it was been COVID. Like, we thought that there'd be more suicides, but in fact, it was because there was this approach of we're in this together,
Connection.
right? You aren't alone through this. And also there was time, we talked a little bit before this podcast about, being able to take some time and do some things that we never thought we could do. So there was time for self-care. There was time for connection. There was time, even though it wasn't in person. So there's such a cue there because it means we can move the needle on suicide. Like, that's not just a pipe dream. And so that's what heChange is all about, is building that community where guys can go in and feel safe. While they're building their health, they can feel safe to connect to one another. So that was such a powerful moment when I saw those statistics come out last week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's definitely, the more that we're in it, and like Mike says, the more that we can help others, the better off we're all going to be, because that helping also helps us as well.
Yeah,
1,000%.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love it all. So let's give a quick shout out about where people can find the book. And we already gave a quick shout out to hechangedit.com to go find the app and become part of that community. The book is up on Amazon. She Changed Me.
She Changed Me, yeah.
If you go to shechangedme.com, that's where we're going to, once this little Amazon launch thing is done, we're going to run a big part of what we do, including speaking engagements and things like that. We're going to run that on shechangedme.com. So if you want to check out the book or any of the other stuff that Candy and I are up to when it comes to that element of things, that's kind of almost a give back part for us right now, is go to shechangedme.com.
Yep.
And then everything else is on hechangedit.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I want to be respectful of your time, because you guys got to go pick up that beautiful granddaughter from
She's in
so
she's in
let's wrap. We've got the one last question I ask everybody. I've got a time machine. We're going to jump in it, go back 10 years. When we open that door, you get to give yourselves one piece of advice. What would that be?
Go ahead.
So give myself one piece of advice, or give Mike one piece of advice?
Oh, let's spice it up and give Mike one piece of advice.
Okay. So if I were to go back in a time machine 10 years ago, I would tell you that to never doubt yourself, because even though it might feel like you are a round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole, and you're different, that's your superpower, and you are an extremely powerful individual because of who you are. And don't ever, ever, ever doubt that moving forward, because that's going to take you through all the way.
You're going to have to sit with that one. That's a beautiful compliment and piece of advice. All right, Mike. I'm not saying that she set the bar high, but she's kind of competitive.
Okay, you know what? Actually, let's full circle this. Okay, 10 years ago, if I give you a piece of advice, it's an entire chapter in the book talks about this too. And it really, really, when somebody in your life is going through stuff, something that's really important is self-care. Because if you are a sponge and you empty that sponge out where it's completely bone dry, It can't hydrate anything. So that sponge needs to take time to continually hydrate itself so it can hydrate others. If I was to give you a piece of advice 10 years ago, I would say, please, please, please don't forget to focus on your self-care and take care of yourself and do things that are going to help you achieve your goals, your dreams, your desires, the rest that you need, the sustenance in your body that you need. Don't forget to make self-care a priority so you can do even more powerful things that you're trying to do. You can be a more powerful mom. You can be a more powerful entrepreneur, business owner. You can be a more powerful, whatever it is you want to be. Don't forget about self-care.
That's a good one. It's a good one.
I had to get back up off the mat, though, after she said mine. Holy shit.
Well, this is definitely when I have two guests going forward. We've now set a new way of sending those acknowledgments out. So definitely.
Yeah.
Gene, hey, man,
All right.
thanks for everything that you're doing. Before we finish off, thanks for everything that you're doing. You are doing something where you're trying to make the world a better and more fun place. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you are creating so many dialogues of self-reflection and understanding and literally wanting to improve in such a positive way. So thank you for everything that you're doing, Gene.
Yes.
Oh, well, it's thank you. I'll just sit with that compliment and say thank you. I feel that right into here. So that means a lot.
Oh, man. Well, it's the truth. It's the truth, brother. And we're honored to have been here today. And I mean, this is the first, you've been on our podcast and we're going to have you back soon. And I just love all of us kind of working our butts off and growing together in the beautiful directions and the beautiful colors and everything that we're growing into. And it's really fun to be on a journey with you. We're all just shooting forward, man.
I love it. I don't know how better to wrap up this episode other than, Mike, you just closed this down perfectly. So this has been Mike and Candace Chisholm on episode 64. And as always, I'm Gene the Enjoyment Coach, and we will see you next Wednesday. Until then.